Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Mindset Mentress Podcast. This is episode 20. And today we're going to be talking about relationships and the three C's that I believe really are key to making a relationship work. There's no such thing as a perfect relationship, but I think there are some key elements, specifically these three C's I'm going to be talking about, that can truly make or break a relationship, especially in this day and age where one, it's incredibly difficult to get into a relationship with somebody who truly aligns with you and what you're looking for. And number two, to stay in that healthy relationship, especially the breakups that seem to happen or divorces that seem to happen years and years into a relationship. It really made me ask the question to myself of, is there a formula to a long-lasting relationship? And of course, it's going to be different for everybody. What works for me may not work for you, and vice versa. But I think there are certain key elements that if we understand and become just aware of how it plays a part within relationships, maybe, just maybe, we can help ourselves have a healthier relationship or give our relationships a better chance of succeeding. I do think that the reason that a lot of divorces happen is because most relationships get to maybe one or two of the three C's I'm going to be talking about, but never get to the third C. Okay. I think a lot of people just get married in the honeymoon phase and only experience the first two C's I'm going to be talking about and completely are unaware of how important the third C is. So that's everything that we're going to be talking about in this episode. And you may ask, what does she know about relationships? Like, she has been single for the last 4 years. Well, let me tell you, sometimes when you actually know too much, it prevents you from getting into a relationship because you just know too much. Because you are self-aware, you are able to be aware of other people. Because you are self-aware, you're able to see the intentions of other people. And you just don't put yourself in positions that you know is going to lead to failure. And yes, it is a double-edged sword. Knowledge is a double-edged sword. The more you know is not always a good thing. But would I choose to have it any other way? Absolutely not. I would rather have knowledge and make sane decisions for myself than go into things naively. Maybe in my early 20s, that would have maybe been a very different conversation. In my 20s, I was definitely very naive and definitely just wanted to like settle down with a person and was a little desperate for a relationship and marriage. But now that's different. And I didn't have to be in 10 relationships to learn 10 lessons, you know? Sometimes we learn all the lessons in one situation, and that's just as valid. So, having said that, let's get into the topic. Here's the first C, and that is chemistry. Okay, chemistry is something that I am so sure we have all experienced in some stage or phase in life. Okay, chemistry is something that is absolutely cannot be faked. Chemistry is this divine kind of feeling, this divine connection that you feel with somebody, and you usually feel chemistry within 5 minutes of meeting somebody. That's how it's been for me. Chemistry always feels like you've known somebody for your entire life when you probably just met them. His chemistry feels like you can completely be 100% yourself and not be too afraid of how the other person is going to judge you. Doesn't mean that the other person is always going to, clap for you, but you just have that feeling of freeness within you where you can completely be yourself and express yourself in your most authentic way. And that person just feels like a safe space. And that person feels like they hold the space for you to be that free self. And it's the most, honestly, the most beautiful feeling. Chemistry, when you feel it with somebody, it's rare. I think for women, at least, we don't feel chemistry with a whole lot of people. We kind of are drawn to specific people that allow the inner child in us to really blossom and really, feel good. So those emotions of chemistry is actually very rare. And when we feel it, it just feels so amazing. You feel safe with this person, you feel comfortable with this person, you feel like you can be your full 1000% authentic self with this person. You feel like you can say whatever you want to say without having judgment of that person. And you can have this back and forth kind of banter. and not have it be boring, because sometimes when we don't have chemistry with somebody, you just are always like thinking about the next thing to say in conversation to not make it awkward, right? But when you feel true chemistry with someone, you can just keep going back and forth, and there's no sense of that awkward silence or no sense of, I need to say something to fill up the gap in this communication kind of feeling. So chemistry, I think, is just so important. But at the same time, this is where chemistry can become a little tricky. Usually our chemistry and the chemistry that we feel with other people, the kind of thing that pulls you towards each other, can also be your same pains that you've experienced in the past. It could be the same triggers that you have. It could be because of the same wounds that you maybe had in your childhood. So here's where chemistry isn't everything, right? Sometimes just going off of chemistry isn't going to be a very healthy thing, because a lot of the times the things that do bring you together, do make you feel that bond with each other, are shared pains, shared childhood wounds, and shared triggers, shared insecurities. So this is where chemistry, yes, is great for like that beginning spark. But then what comes up next after that is, this is the second C, and that is compatibility. Okay. I know everybody talks about compatibility. I know that we have an understanding that we cannot be with people that we are not compatible with, but I don't think we have an understanding of what exactly compatibility is. Okay. This is my theory on what compatibility is. Think of compatibility as, like a jigsaw puzzle, right? If you look at a jigsaw puzzle, all of the individual pieces of the jigsaw puzzle make up one picture, right? But the individual pieces by themselves, when they're not put together, all are all look a little different. All are cut up a little bit different, right? So what does this mean for relationships? Compatibility and real compatibility is understanding that you as two individuals are cut differently. Okay. So the different cuts come up in different habits, different passions, different hobbies, different things that excite you, and it also comes up in your strengths and your weaknesses. Okay. So one person in a relationship might be really extroverted and can go up in front of a room and really work a room and get to know people and network. Well, the other person is not as loud, but they can gather that information and do something with that information, right? So if you look at it as like a couple that does business together, you'll often see one of the two being the person that goes out there and promotes the business and markets it and networks and brings people in, while the other person is better, or their strength is in executing that business. And so they take what they have, for example, the business that comes in, the clients, and they're able to actually do logistical work that needs to be done to get the show on the road, right? So going back to the whole jigsaw puzzle picture, compatibility is just like that. You as individual puzzle pieces, jigsaw pieces, are cut differently in your habits, your passions, your strengths, and your weaknesses. Okay? But when you put all of you together, you have the same big picture. And in addition to that, you are made of the same material. Okay? So, yes, you have different strengths and weaknesses, but you are made of the same material. And by same material, I mean you have the same foundation and the same principle of how you choose to view life, how you choose to live your life. So that comes up in your morals, your ethics, your values, your belief systems, how you choose to live your life with morals, how you choose to raise your children, where you choose to live, what kind of money you want to spend every month. So you have to be on the same page about the big picture stuff. You have to be made of the same material in that sense, in your foundation, in your soul, and who you are as a person. But you will be cut differently, as in your strengths and their weaknesses come together and fit together perfectly in a way that it builds a big picture. And both of your individual goals within that relationship is to excel at your individual strengths, understand the other person's weakness, and always have, idea or always have that end goal of that big picture to keep you guys on the same path. Okay, so that is essentially what compatibility is. There's this whole thing about opposites attract, and I think that's true, but not completely true. Yes, opposites may attract, like in terms of strengths and weaknesses. Like, for example, one person being introverted and one person being extroverted might really work in how a couple might work together in business, or running a house, for instance, or, just being partners. Those strengths and weaknesses come together in that sense. And in that sense, yes, opposites may attract, but I think that's also a very, very superficial way to look at relationships. I think there's more than just opposites attract to keep a relationship going. And, that's where compatibility is important. Yes, opposites attract, but what's going to keep that attraction is that compatibility piece of learning to work with each other and working with each other's strengths and weaknesses. And now we're finally down to the third C, which most relationships don't even get to this part. Like I was saying earlier, I think most divorces tend to happen because people just kind of get married either in the chemistry phase and they get to see the compatibility phase, but rarely people get to the compromise phase because it takes about 7 years to 10 years to get to the compromise phase. Up until maybe 4 years or 5 years, even 6 years into a relationship, I think that's still kind of like a honeymoon phase. The honeymoon phase, I know people say it lasts 3 months, but I don't think that's true. I think real honeymoon phase lasts at least 6 years, 7 years, where you really, really love this person so much and you are, you're figuring things out. And that honeymoon phase, I think, pretty much takes up the chemistry portion and takes care of the compatibility portion. But very rarely couples make it to the compromise position. Older I get, I realize that compromise is so, so important. Compromise is so important. I feel like compromise is something that continues to live on to the rest of your relationship. And let's be clear, we're not saying you have to compromise on like domestic violence situations. We're not saying compromise on blatant disrespect or violence. You don't have to take that kind of compromise, but the compromise that I'm talking about is more of just being more okay with letting the other person win arguments sometimes. I was actually reading the book The Big Leap by Gay Hendricks, and he was talking about how arguments in marriages are one of the biggest reasons that people are unhappy in marriages, and how as we argue, we are basically asking ourselves to be in a position of the victim. So when you're arguing back and forth, you're basically arguing with the person of who's the bigger victim in the situation. And it's so easy, like in the moment, right, when you are in an argument to say things maybe you don't mean and you want to be the one that's right all the time. Compromise is when you are okay with not being right. It's being open and okay with doing things and handling things that may come up in the moment and that you may not be prepared for, and being okay with it, being okay with not winning all the time, being okay with taking the loss, being okay with letting things go because you love the person, because you care about that person, and because, most important of all, because you want to keep the peace. Okay? But the caveat to this is you shouldn't be the only one that's always doing the compromise. Compromise is something that both of you have to pick up. Both of you have to pick up the slack equally, or at least should feel like you're picking up the slack equally. If one person continues to pick up the slack constantly, that one person is going to get extremely resentful, and they're going to feel like their needs and their wants are not being met. So it's important that both parties continue to give to each other and pick up the slack and be okay with it. You're not always going to get everything that you want with life in general. and also making peace with that and not having marriage as in your mind this thing that's going to be so fulfilling to you, and not putting so much pressure also, not just marriages but relationships as well, that it is going to be the end all be all of defining moment of your life, and not having all your expectations of fulfillment in the relationship or marriage, I think is also so important. And this is why you have to have your own fulfilled individual lives, so you don't like expect the other person to be the only source of giving that to you. And because you are whole, full people, it becomes easier to compromise because you don't have that level of expectation on this other person, and you're okay with taking a loss because you are winning in other areas of your life, and they're okay with taking the loss because they have their own things going on. And quite honestly, you guys are just so busy with your lives that you don't care to like create little arguments out of little things, or create drama because you just have so much going on that's outside of this marriage or relationship that's fulfilling to you. And I think Michelle Obama said this once, and it was just so eye-opening, I think, to a lot of people, where she said in her marriage with Obama, it was never 50-50. Sometimes it was 30-70, sometimes it was 40-60, and how that just kind of just kept shifting based on the needs of the relationship, of the family, of their kids, and and then their political careers. Understanding each other's needs and stepping up to the plate when you need them to, and letting things go that don't need to be blown up, are just basically what compromise is. And it's not a bad word. Compromise isn't a bad thing unless you are the only one that's always compromising. It's not a bad thing. It's actually, I think, very, very healthy to keep the peace of the relationship, the marriage, the family together. So we have chemistry, we have compatibility, and compromise, the three C's of a healthy relationship, in my opinion. I think these are the three keys of understanding how we can have a better, more fulfilling relationship for ourselves, and just becoming more self-aware, especially in moments where you are not having a great moment in your relationship or marriage. That's when you need to revisit these themes and really become so honest with yourself and ask yourself, like, what is lacking? Is it the chemistry that's lacking? Like, do I not feel safe? Do I not feel like I can be vulnerable with this person anymore? Is it the compatibility piece where your strengths and your weaknesses and their strengths and your weaknesses just don't work together anymore, or you don't have the same big picture vision for your marriage or relationship? Or is it compromise? Is it that you are not able to be self-sacrificing in certain places to compromise for the other person? Or is it vice versa? Or do you feel like you are the only one that's always compromising, and do you feel like you can't communicate that? Do you feel like you're not heard? So really sitting down and getting so real with yourself, and then understanding what's going on, and then approaching the issue from a more self-aware perspective is always a healthier way to do it, rather than just going for a screaming match with a person because you just want to get it all out. But if you just sit down with yourself and just try to understand what's going on for yourself, and then approach the other person from a place of more calm and understanding, I think it'll just be a more productive outcome, a more productive discussion overall. So with that, that is the end of episode 20, the three C's of a healthy relationship. I really hope you were able to get something out of this. With every episode, I always do want to add a disclaimer at the end, which says that end of the day, you know yourself more than anybody could ever know you. You know your relationship more than anybody could ever tell you. You know what's actually going on behind closed doors. And when you take advice on the internet, or when you look at certain perspectives on the internet, take what you can get from it, but also become very real with yourself in what those things might mean to you. And the only way that you can get to the bottom of what works for you is if you get to know yourself. So thank you so much for tuning in, and I will see you next week with another episode. If you haven't done so, subscribe to the channel and also subscribe to me on Spotify. And if you want to follow me on my social media, all of that is linked in the description. And share this topic with your friends and your family, and share it with, people who you think may benefit from learning about this. And also, don't forget to like and comment on this video as well. And I'll see you next week with another episode. Bye, guys.